All right, here we go. Next section of the chapter, our introductory chapter. Let's write another little program together. I know that we wrote one program together. Do you remember the one that we did that computed area of a circle? I did that to explain the assignment of a value to a variable and decided I wanted to have a program in which that was done. But let's write another program together. Just to give another example about how it is that you write code and good comments that you can add to that code to explain to a human reader what it does. But I also want to make another point as well, because we'll see a certain kind of repetition in the code that I think you will probably find quite tedious. And I will make a promise to you. I will promise you that in the next chapter, whose topic is functions, I will show you how to avoid this repetition, this tedious repetition. Okay, so here's the task that I wish us to undertake. And this is something that actually could be potentially useful to us. Let's write a tip calculator and make it sort of full-featured. So what this tip calculator will do is this: is it will take the pre-tax cost of a meal, and it will tell us what that was. Then it will compute the cost of the meal plus the tax, and it will print that too. And then it will tell us what the person actually needs to pay. That is the cost with the tip. And I'll do it like this. We won't actually give a tip on the tax that is paid. I've always wondered what the right choice about that is, but I've recently begun to give very good tips, so it doesn't really make a difference, I suppose. So let's begin to write some code. Okay, now there's something that I will actually talk about in a later video that is variable choice. Just to give examples of variables, I've used some very simple ones like A and B and C and so on. Let me go ahead and say to you that you probably ought never use such simple names for variables, maybe in a few rare cases. But typically what you want variables to do is to explain to a human reader what kind of value it holds. So for instance, instead of r, I mean, in the context of circle area, that's not too bad because a human reader would guess, that signifies radius. But even better would be just simply radius. So in this particular program we're about to write, we won't use like A and B and C or X and Y and Z to hold values, that is to name values. Instead, we'll actually use variable names that describe the value that is held. Like for instance, pre-tax and tax rate and tip rate and so on. So let's go ahead and do this. So let's see. So pre-tax price. Okay. Well, let's see. Well, let's say that it turned out to be $27.99, which is not too bad for two people, I suppose. And then let's see, what is the tax rate? I don't know. So let's say the tax rate is a very reasonable 3.8%. So I forgot my assignment token, so I will add that in. And then tip percent. And notice that these are stored as percents. I think I might add a comment to that to indicate that that is the case. So let's do at least 20%, so that will be a 20. I tell you what, I'll go ahead and add a comment in. So the comment will say this: tax rate and tip, no underscore there, tax rate and tip rate stored as percents. Okay. Now, we didn't have to store them as percents. For instance, the tip rate could have been stored as 0.2. That's equivalent to 20%, but we'll say that they're stored in percents. And do you understand then what that comment did? It doesn't tell Python because Python simply ignores line number 2 or will when we execute the program. That's what hashtag does for Python. It says, hey, ignore and go to the next line. This is for the human reader. And you don't, have to comment every line of code because some lines of code are actually quite clear in themselves, like line number 1, given that we have such a good variable name there, pre-tax price, it doesn't need a comment. But I think it would be helpful to indicate that we do mean to have percents for the computations we're about to do. Okay, so let's see. How about price with tax? Well, how are we going to get the price with tax? Well, you're going to take the pre-tax price and you're going to add something to that. What are you going to add to that? You're going to add the tax rate. But notice that's a percent, right? So to convert that to a decimal, which is what we need to do, we'll divide by 100. And I tell you what, we'll put that inside of parentheses. It's mathematically not necessary, but it certainly helps a human reader to understand what just happened. So tax rate divided by 100 times the pre-tax price. That's how tax works, right? You multiply it by the pre-tax price and you add that back into pre-tax price. So let's actually print these out. So the pre-tax price is pre-tax price. And you're with me about what just happened here, right? So it's the print command, the print function. There's a comma, so we'll print two values, one after the other, and you've of course seen that a space is put in between them. And the first object that we will print, that is the object that comes before the comma, which I will now highlight. That is a string. That message is printed out. And then what comes after is not a string. Instead, it is a variable, and the value of the variable will be printed, which is 27.99. And then on line number 7, we'll print the price with tax. So price with tax, and then comma, price with tax. It might seem repetition, but it's not, because again, the first is a string and the second is not. And then how about with tip? Okay, that is price with tip. So what are we going to do? Okay, so how about this? How about total paid, which includes the tip. Ooh, and I think I might put a comment in here. So total paid includes tip. So the total paid will be, well, what do we need? We need the price with tax. Oh, and if you look on my site, sorry, I can't spell. If you look on my site, I've actually written the code out a bit differently. And this is just the way that it is, right? I mean, there are various ways to write the code, ways to spell the variables, way to organize the code that ultimately result in the same behavior, right? Don't think that every correct program has to be like symbol for symbol identical with every other. There can be very real differences between them. And people have styles for sure. And I can tell you this right now, I will have seen enough of your code by the end of the year that I will begin to recognize individual student styles. Okay. But let me say this: don't develop bad habits at the start. That is, take the time to actually think about your variable names to make sure that they actually do describe the values that they hold, and think about what comments you would like to add to help out a human reader. Okay, so total paid is the price plus tax plus, now I've got to use tip percent, right? So tip percent underscore, so tip percent, and I have to turn that into a decimal, so I have to divide it by 100. And then let's see, I was going to tip not on the price that included tax, but only the pre-tax price. Okay, so let's see if this seems right. So let's read over the code. Of course, you'll check as you go. So the total paid is the price with tax, which is right, plus 10% divided by 100, which is right, had to convert to a decimal, times the pre-tax price. Okay, and then we'll print that out. So print total paid, and then total paid. Okay, so let's actually run this and then hope it doesn't crash. Perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. You'll find that very often when you write a little bit of code and then try it out, it will crash. So let's see. Oh, it didn't crash. So let's see. Pre-tax price is $27.99. That is correct. Price with tax is 29.05. Oh, there's something here that, of course, is an annoyance, right? Um, if you were, for instance, to see a bill, if you went to a restaurant, you would only get 2 digits after the decimal point. It really doesn't make sense to have more than that. Let's not talk about how it is that you would make that happen. There is a built-in round function in Python, and you can look that up if you want to, but we won't worry about that at this particular moment in time. Just do keep in mind that if there is ever anything that you want to do in Python, like round a float, and those are floats, right? Decimal point. If you want to round to a certain number of digits after the decimal point, Python will, of course, provide that functionality in some way or another. Anything that you want to do, there is a way that in Python that can be done, but we won't worry about that. So price with tax, that's plausible. And then total paid is, I tell you what, I'm going to go and add the is's in just to prove that we can actually modify the code. So I added is's in. And then, yeah, pre-tax price is $27.99. price with tax is, total paid is, and so on, right? So this is actually something that's potentially useful. Now, let's say that we wanted to do something else. Let's say that we wanted to do this same set of computations, but with a different total price paid, okay? Excuse me, with a different pre-tax price. Well, here's a way that you could do that. It seems really sort of tedious and repetitious, right? And it results in lots and lots of code. Okay, so we could get a different pre-tax price, right? So like, I don't know, 32.83. We spent a little bit more this time. And then, yeah, so it's all there, right? It's all there. But gosh, I mean, that's a whole lot of code, isn't it? And if we wanted to do it with a third price, then, we'd have even more code. I mean, there just has to be a better way, right? I mean, this is not how code works. Like, of course, the computers that are used at the restaurants at which we eat, I mean, they run code, right? But it's not like this where somebody has to go in and like actually manually assign a value to a variable and then, to replicate all the same code again. There must be a way to like sort of capture what is similar in this code in a single block, right? And not have to write it over and over and over again. Well, the answer is yes. Yes, of course there is. And the basic way to do this is with a function. So this is the promise that I said I would make to you. The promise is that in the next chapter, I will show you how to capture the same, so to make code do what this code does, but not have to copy paste the code so that you get this kind of repetition. Okay, there's a way to write it once but have it run multiple times. Okay, so write once, run multiple times. There's absolutely a way to do that, and we will do that with functions. But that point to the side, here are examples of programs, okay, or an example of a program. And it's got the basic structure of a program, right? We assign a value to a variable, we do computations, we print out the result of the computations. We've actually got comments in here to explain to the reader what it is that has been done. We have been very careful about our variable names so that they actually do describe the values that they hold. So, good for us.